Recently, I heard an individual speaking about the biblical principle of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And many people have questioned that over time and even use this as a justification for treating somebody the way that they've been treated. So I wanted to just briefly consider that. The concept of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, comes from the first, well, I guess you could say the Torah. We'll just call it that. The Torah, the Pentateuch, the law of Moses. It shows up in Exodus. It shows up in Leviticus. It shows up in Deuteronomy. And Jesus actually references it. We're going to look at what Jesus said, and we're going to tie it together with how he concluded his remarks. But you can find this in Matthew chapter 5. And specifically in verse 38, Jesus says, "You've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth." So he's quoting this from Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy. And he says, that's what you've heard. That's what you understand. But I'm going to tell you something different. He says, but I tell you not to resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. And he says, and whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away. So Jesus is taking this concept of an eye for an eye, and he says, no, what I want you to do is not use that as an excuse. I'm going to give them back what they gave. He says, I want you to have a different perspective and a different attitude. I'm going to read a little bit more here, because when he continues talking and where he goes in this section, is to ties it all together. So we're just going to read a little bit more. He says the next one, he says in verse 43, you've heard that it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Well, the love your neighbor, that's also from the Torah. That's from the first 5 books of the law there in the Old Testament, the books of Moses. The hate your enemy part, that's what they added to it. And he says, but I say to you. So Jesus says, you've heard this said, but what I'm telling you is the way that you should be looking at this. He says, but I tell you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. Now that sounds really, really weird to us, because that's not what we see. That's not the way that we learn. We're schooled, we're taught through life and experience. No, somebody does you wrong, you get them back. Somebody does me wrong, does something I don't like, I want to get even or get ahead. And this is the way that it's generally done. But Jesus says, I want you to turn that around. I want you to love the person that's treating you wrong. Now, why in the world would we do that? And see, this is still related to the eye for an eye. He says, no. Don't think in terms of an eye for an eye. Don't think about getting back. I want you to think about going the extra mile, taking the high road. I want you to be the one that when you get hit, that you offer another target. When somebody wants to take from you, give them more than they're asking. When somebody compels you to walk with them even further. This is completely weird. This is strange. But notice what he says as he goes on here in verse 45, that you may be, or that you are, because you are the sons and the daughters of your Father in heaven. Okay, so he says you're a child of God. You are a child of God. And if you are, so is that person that you have called an enemy or that has mistreated you. And he says, God makes the sun to shine on the evil and on the good. He sends rain on the just and the unjust. God is not respecting you thinking you're better. How could they treat you that way? He says, that's my child too. And what my child fails to see, fails to understand, is what this child is doing and how he or she is acting and treating you. Can you see it the way God sees it? That's what Jesus is trying to encourage us. For he says, because if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? I mean, even the people that you think are wicked, tax collectors, they do the same. And if you greet your brothers, only them, but you ignore the others, what are you? You're just like the tax collectors. And the summation of this is in verse 48. Jesus says, Therefore, concluding, bringing this all together, don't think eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Don't think hate my enemies. I'm going to love my brother, but I'm going to hate my enemy. He says, no. He says, therefore, you shall be perfect just as your Father in heaven is perfect. So the standard and the example is God is our Father. And he says, you should be like him. You should be merciful and kind. You should be perfect and good like he is. And Jesus is turning it upside down, saying, don't think according to the flesh. Yes, the eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth was written into the law. And by the way, that was only written in terms of penalty if you're convicted, not for you as an individual to take it. But people fought that way. And they would think, I'm going to take his eye because he took mine. But that was the legal penalties, the punishment needed to fit the crime. And you can read those and see that's what it's talking about. Jesus says, but you have a higher standard. Your standard as a child of God, knowing that the one treating you wrong as a child of God, is to be like your Father who loves all of his children. God loves all of his children, and he wants you to love all of his children as well.